Greta Gerwig's 2023 film Barbie is predicted to be the greatest of all time. It's solving wars, ending gender inequity, making grape-flavored soda palatable, and most importantly, it's answering the question that has driven nearly every single person to eat their hair like a bowl of spaghetti.
Now I will open up with a very serious, hard-hitting question. Alright, so I guess the first question, it's very deep, very complex. What is
Kenergy?
Kenergy?
Kenergy is. Yeah, well, I have that Kenergy.
Sure do.
Vacant, unadulterated joy?
Yes. Hold up. Ken sucks.
Yeah, he does beach.
Ken has no house, no home, and no job, and like.
What is it?
Wait, what are we talking about?
What does it mean to have Kenergy?
He's an assistant, a supporter to Barbie and whatever she needs. And if French kissing lessons are it, he's right there to provide.
Himbo-ish.
Kenergy doesn't really have the greatest scope. Mostly we talk about being a vapid loser, boy toy, pretty boy, artificial plastic, nothing. He's just Ken. Just Ken.
You know a Ken in your life, and then you know that Ken has Kenergy.
Kenergy is ineffable, really, or Supreme Court Justice Potter Stewart famously said, "I know it when I see it." However, Gosling does provide some categories of Kenergy.
He's got no money, he's got no job, he's got no car.
Basically, he ascribes Kenergy to Ken's socioeconomic inferiority in comparison to Barbie. Ken's dependence on Barbie is best exemplified in the second best TV show of all time. Life in the Dream House. As the Protestant work ethic dictates, Ken goes on a mission to find his calling. He embarks on this quest once his masculinity is threatened by Ryan. To be a man is to have a job, so he does, the usual lifeguard to astronaut pipeline. Ultimately, he realizes he exists for Barbie. The domestic labor of boyfriendhood is his destiny.
Wait a second. Being Barbie's boyfriend is my calling!
Frankly, it is honest to his lore. Ken was invented to please...
Foreshadowing Barbie?
She must herself object. She should therefore renounce her autonomy. She is treated like a live doll and refused liberty. Thus, a vicious cycle is formed. For the less she exercises her freedom, the less she will dare to affirm herself as a subject.
As I was saying, Barbie's relationship to Ken is Ken's entirety. It defines his essence, his function, his soul. And notably, while Barbie is necessary for Ken's existence, he isn't necessary for hers. He's an accessory, and a not very successful one at that. Ken was introduced in 1961 as the great American boyfriend, and though all his fans should have wanted him and his smartly tailored wardrobe of the finest quality materials, he never sold as well as Barbie.
He's an accessory, and not even one of the cool ones.
His sales took a notable decline in 1969, prompting Mattel to innovate his redesigns and perform incredible marketing stunts across the decades. After a survey asked girls whether they wanted Barbie to find a new boyfriend, they voted to keep the couple together, but wished Ken looked cooler. Enter 1993's Earring Magic Ken, who sported tight pants, a mesh top, and they gave Ken, they made him a necklace with a pendant that he can share with Barbie, but it looked like
Putting around his neck.
So, while Ken is an icon of American heteromasculinity, he has long belonged to a subordinated masculinity. He seemingly contradicts the hegemonic definition of manhood. A man in power. A man with power. We equate manhood with being strong, successful, capable, reliable, in control. The very definitions of manhood we have developed in our culture maintain power that some men have over other men, and that men have over women.
Fashion, fun, and friends, all online and just for girls.
Ken evidently lacks power. The loser and queerness attached to his Kenergy appears to be a reaction to such a contradiction, but it was Earring Magic Ken that truly cemented Ken as a gay icon. It also remains the #1 best-selling Ken doll.
Mattel tried to refute Ken's queerness by calling him wholesome, but that's what we call a homophobic dog whistle, or in this case, I don't have a whistle, so we'll call it a homophobic kazoo.
And in the 2000s, it wasn't only Ken who was suffering from low sales numbers. Due to the success of Bratz and Barbie's derisive place within pop culture for being a central site of white supremacy,
half of the children said white Barbie was prettiest. Half of the children said the black Barbie was bad.
anti-fatness, ableism, and cis-heteronormativity, Barbie herself began a persistent downward sales trajectory. So, like a desperate publicist trying to revive the morbid career of a Hollywood movie star, Mattel pulled out all the stops. To capitalize on an era when celebrity breakups abounded, for example, Bennifer again, Ken and Barbie broke up.
Because I will confirm that Ken and Barbie are going to go their separate ways.
In the Cali Girl line, Ken was best friend zoned and Barbie was paired with Blaine.
I don't love you anymore.
Since when?
Now. Just now.
But Mattel was invested in a long-time campaign that would bring the couple back together by Barbie's 50th anniversary. And so, the first greatest television show of all time was born.
These 8 guys have been chosen from thousands to compete for the title of Genuine Ken, the great American boyfriend.
Imagine a show that's a combination of The Bachelorette, America's Next Top Model, and Twin Peaks, and then wildly lower your expectations because the show was made with a Monopoly money budget and a cast of 8 straight men. However, the show does give us some of the greatest insights into the meaning of Kenergy. A genuine Ken has
all the characteristics us women look for in our men. Things like style, romance, and athleticism.
That's it. The challenges themselves unveil the main characteristics of Kenergy. Episode 1, entertainment. They do a talent show because Kens are entertaining. Episode 2, Ken interior designing because they decorate walls and Kens decorate walls. Episode 3, it's basically just a surfing lesson because Malibu Ken surfing. Episode 4, can he cook? This is what I would call perfect cinema. They put a bunch of 20-something dude bros in a kitchen with no instructions. It's gorgeous.
I walk into the kitchen and it's already hot. I was really scared. The ovens are about as hot as the sun. The pressure cooker can explode and blast your face off.
The spinach? Is that, I don't even know if that's spinach. I don't know if it is or not.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah,
That's spinach.
Truly perfect. I would also like to highlight this guy. He's perfectly normal in all his talking heads, and the moment the camera is on,
yeah. I'm not a huge chicken fan. Chicken? I've never ordered chicken at a restaurant. It's cheap.
He's Patrick Bateman. He talks like Patrick Bateman. And the editors, who by this point you will have noticed were held at gunpoint by the stock sound effect mafia, appear to hate him. In episode 1, Derek heralded himself as a great music producer.
I make electronic music, mix it with hip-hop, mix it with rock guitars. And girls tend to like that.
He performs a bad song at the entertaining talent show, and when Derek is eliminated, the editors remind us of that.
If you decide you can stay for the ride, blast off. Here I am, there I go. 3, 2, 1.
I've memorized nearly half of everything he said. I really don't know how to describe the quality of the show, but I imagine the experience is similar to ongoing quotidian use of an 8-in-1 Head & Shoulders body product. It's bad. It's very bad. I love it. It's perfect, no notes. The challenges are almost entirely arbitrary because, surprise, surprise, it's actually fairly difficult to create compelling narratives about a Ken. He's defined by his artificial and vacuous perfection and a similarly passionless yet idealized relationship to Barbie. It's funny, but not compelling. We'll see Ken's nurgatory-ness head on in Mattel's next grand marketing move.
Barbie, you're beautiful. You make me feel my Barbie doll is really real.
Toys are foundational elements of childhood development and some of the most powerful tools for exposing unsuspecting wee babes into normative gender roles and behaviors. As a result, when Barbie emerged in 1959, Mattel tells us that she was radical.
Barbie was a wildly revolutionary toy. Barbie became things that real women hadn't become.
First, she was made by a woman. This woman, Ruth Handler. Second, she was, as the first catalog entry explains, an exciting new kind of doll. She's grown up. She's a doll from the real world. Barbie was a doll from the real world, which controversially entailed no bunkangaroos. Yet this was not a move to encourage the sexualization of teenagers. According to Handler, I wanted them to dream their dreams through Barbie. Middle-class white girls could dream of anything with Barbie. Sort of. Rather, they could dream the American dream with Barbie. Barbie was a teenage supermodel with a wardrobe of haute French couture. She was also a perfectly feminine housewife with the perfect outfit for, yes, cooking and cleaning and marriage. The now infamous branding move that took Barbie from a bread-baking homemaker to a space-sailing breadwinner occurred during the second wave of white feminism in the 60s and 70s. This was an era of Betty Friedan's The Feminine Mystique, the limits of gender roles, gender-based discrimination in the workplace for white women, and white women's socioeconomic dependence on men were the movement's dominant focus.
Men have made a mess of things they should be stopped by now.
Sort of start getting into these movements, and even after you've been in here for a while, honestly, like it's so easy to like accidentally find yourself in the assimilationist camp where you're like, actually you're not doing anything liberatory, you're just kind of adapting yourself to make the marginalization that you're a part of more acceptable to hegemony.
They aren't frivolous demands at all. We just want what men have had all these years.
Consequently, as protesters shouted, "We are not a Barbie doll," that very doll entered the workplace. But she would do it in heels. In the 1960s, when, as an astronaut, she went to the moon 4 years before Neil Armstrong. In the 1970s, Barbie saved lives in the operating room as a surgeon, at a time when few women were applying to medical school. In the 1980s, she took to the boardroom as day-to-night CEO Barbie. Barbie recognizes girls' relevant careers in which women are traditionally underrepresented to show girls that they can be anything. Mattel utilized the same maneuver when they began their in-house entertainment division in 2001. They were going to reorient classic, often patriarchal fairy tales and make Barbie the heroic, active lead at its center. They also embarked on the mission to make art of the, fancy pants genre accessible through Barbie. She was the keymaster to gatekept mediums of opera, ballet, and classical literature. Most pertinently, Bibble saves the day in Barbie Mermaidia by singing Der hohle Rache kocht in meinem Herzen.
It's so true. I love you, man.
Moreover, they exerted the incredible effort to record classical scores with actual orchestras, which, outside of my nostalgia goggles, contributes to the longevity of the initial films. Take the difference between Princess and the Pauper, London Symphony Orchestra,
sing lullabies and always harmonize in thirds, thirds, thirds,
and Princess and the Pop Star.
There's just one way you must behave.
The early films also include better bloopers. They really commit to the bit and pretend that Barbie is like a real actress that the animators didn't spend hours animating. In my expert opinion, I think the Pegasus one has the best bloopers.
Aiden?
Let's cut the line. It's not working for me.
Non sequitur. I barely know her. There's Lord of the Rings references. Like this shot in The Musketeers.
After what you've done, you girls don't belong at the castle. Your place is with the Musketeers.
You bow to no one.
Musketeers! It's like that one, and then the Eagles, and the One Ring. No. This is irrefutable proof. But these references could be intentional, or at the very least inevitable, because more so than Disney or DreamWorks, Mattel made the pop feminist gesture of inserting Barbie into the sanctified halls of dude stories, featuring dudes or bros. She was going to prove Joseph Campbell wrong, and she was going to do it by embodying the hero's journey of life, death, and rebirth and transformation like Jesus crucified on a glittery blade.
The prophecy is true.
Barbie is Ulysses, outwitting a Cyclops, a girl boss pink D'Artagnan in The Three Musketeers, Mark Twain's Princess and the Pauper. Now it's Princess and the Pauper. It's a film in which Barbie realizes how white supremacist capitalist patriarchy instrumentalizes the soul, consumes our subjectivity, chews our desires and spits out commodities, and ultimately disappears our ability to be free.
There's more to living than gloves and gowns and threads and seams. In my dreams, I'll be free.
What I'm trying to say is, a girl like you,
Just like you.
realizes the reality of commodity fetishism, the process by which the goods of a laborer are transformed into transcendent objects external from that person's labor. To demonstrate, let's look at René Magritte's Treachery of Images. It is a painting of a pipe with the words, "This is not a pipe," written beneath it. It uses language to remind you that the painting of the pipe is not a pipe, it's a representation of a pipe. A thing and its name are arbitrary. Things only have meaning when we add meaning to them. The association between the object and the word is something we construct, or learn to construct. Similarly, Marx also explains that when something becomes a commodity, it is abstracted as something transcendent and magical. He compares it to how wood turns into a table and then into a commodity. So,
it not only stands with its feet on the ground, but in relation to all other commodities, it stands on its head and evolves out of its wooden brain grotesque ideas far more wonderful than table turning ever was.
Humans only have one ending.
Get that Barbie!
Ideas live forever.
just as the meaning of an image is constructed through associations, commodities are fetishized because of their social relations. Where images are treacherous because they obfuscate the meaning-making process, fetishized commodities are treacherous because they hide the actual labors behind a product.
I love Madame Carp's dresses. I made the one you're wearing. You made this? It's my favorite.
Barbie too realizes that social divisions are artificially constructed. What separates this from a pipe and a princess from a pauper is entirely arbitrary. The unequal distribution of privilege is not a result of any individual essence or natural superiority, but the artificial coincidence of a birthmark. In contrast to their superficial difference, they are meaningfully similar. They are both people confused for property. They are Aristotle's instruments with a soul, and their very souls are made alien to them.
Do a plie and never fall. Don't ever stray from protocol. All through the day, there's just one way you must behave.
Because society doesn't only alienate people from work, it denies everyone the possibility of a free individual existence. When you are an object before you are a person, you lack substantial connections to the self, the natural world, and those around you. Can you think of what you want in life? Can you imagine a future that is not shaped by oppression? Estrangement is manifested not only in the fact that the means of my life belong to something, but that desire is the inaccessible possession of the other.
We have not just been colonized in our minds. We've been colonized in our imaginations.
I think it shocked me when I started the podcast in 2017 that people had a hard time imagining.
Listen, what would the world be like if it loved you?
Like they could critique the world as it is, but they it felt much harder for them to imagine the world as they would like it to be.
What would the world look like if it loved you?
Like, I thought we were going to just be co-creating this world together and like, okay, we'd have this component if it loved you and this component if it loved me. But when people get stopped in their tracks and arrested in breath, like, I don't know. I don't believe that could ever exist. I'm like, oh my gosh, like we are in much more trouble than I imagined we were if people can't even imagine the world. If a world loved me, it would love everybody in the world. Like people would feel care for each other. They would see each other. They would recognize the humanity of each other. We would have institutions that recognized that some people don't have the same access as other people, and they would be actively working to change that every day. Our loyalties wouldn't be to status. Our loyalties wouldn't be to power, but they would be to love.
But Barbie doesn't dismantle the oppressive systems. In fact, she sanctifies its power. One of the Barbies leaves to pursue a life of independent dream chasing and still returns to marry her prince, preserving the monarchy. It also would have given the prince a really interesting character arc if he abdicated to pursue his freedom alongside Erica. Yet, this could just be a symptomatic failure to write any three-dimensional love interest for Barbie. Barbie's films are adventures, heroes' journeys first and foremost. Romance is never compulsory, so when a suitor is present, he is the sidekick, and more a brute force object of utility than a character. Ken can provide the brawn, while Barbie's brains and strategy actually solve the conflict. In Barbie and the Diamond Castle, for example, they are always 2 steps behind the protagonist, navigating through the adventure because the girls already solved the quest. They shift the formula slightly by making them Beatlesque twins that do a "I'm just a silly little guy, I'm just a guy" electric guitar solo.
Wicked!
But the possibility of romance never really leaves the realm of suggestion.
Do you suppose they need an escort? Someone has to keep them out of trouble.
Goodbye!
As the first Ken commercial consecrates, the Barbie and Ken relationship is never the end point. We're supposed to imagine where the romance could lead.
Get both Barbie and Ken and see where the romance will lead. It could lead to this.
Moreover, Barbie usually has more chemistry with her femme co-star, even if there is a conflict over a Ken.
But this is where he and I hang out, so maybe you should just go back to the fairy frontier.
Magic Meadow.
Whatever.
The 2 leads usually have a really interesting enemies to lovers arc, and a really lovely little Lord of the Rings reference.
Delicious.
And The Diamond Castle is, of course, the gayest Barbie movie. There's a lesbian bisexual flag dresses, cottagecore fantasy, this rainbow bridge, and the very sapphic muses. In contrast to Barbie's co-stars, when a Ken is present, he's rarely a full character. Writers usually resort to a few lacking formulas. Option 1. Give him a hobby. Barbie may lack agency due to patriarchy, but he suffers because his position of power prevents him from hunting, inventing, colonizing. Damn. Option 2, hero's journey subversion, where her guy is the damsel in distress or the temptress. I mean, look at this Prince Nalu Fairytopia eyeball chemistry. It's delicious.
Stop it.
Option 3, it's just really liking Barbie. These ones often conclude with a dance sequence, and I like that. Engaging with Barbie's hobby, even if they aren't typically masculine, make my tummy butterflies go. I may be asexual, but I am a man-respecting woman juice alcoholic. It also complies with core Ken lore.
Barbie always loved to sing, dance, and act. I have a very lively imagination, she once said, and Ken was always there to accompany her.
Ken's dedication to supporting Barbie's dreams is best seen when he, without a moment of hesitation, agrees to help Barbie celebrate the first day of world peace by performing at the first rock concert in space.
The one place we haven't performed is out of this world.
What? I wouldn't miss this for the world. For the universe.
And might I say, this might be my favorite Ken look. I mean, the eyelashes, the sparkles, the mullet, the chemistry between Ken, this guy, and the galaxy. But even Ken doesn't compare to the majesty of the abrupt musical sequences.
Hey, gang! Things are going to be fine. Believe me.
banana split.
Maddie, can you get me a paper towel, please?
One day more, another day, another destiny.
And that gag brings us to comedic relief. Previously, I described the Barbie movie's uncanny relationship to diegesis.
We're still shooting here.
Ollie's going for lunch.
When Barbie is telling stories to her sisters, they are presumably fictional. Yet there is always a little wink wink, nudge nudge towards the possibility that the stories are more than just fiction. Barbie and Teresa magically know the lyrics to Liana and Lex's song, and Barbie mysteriously paints a landscape on which Rapunzel found her freedom. Additionally, the bloopers are presumably non-diegetic because, well, goblins and breakdancing dogs can't exist in real life. Right?
Not this time.
Barbie reveals she actually is an actor in all the previous films, and yes, that means goblins are real now. So they kicked Dylan, Daniel, Derek, whatever his name was, into the abyss. Ken stars as himself. Or does he star back?
There I go.
But as we've established, it's incredibly difficult to contend with Ken as a character who has motives, flaws, capacity for growth, so he's just given comedy B-plots. In Barbie, a fashion fairy tale, he chases after Barbie to France and endures a series of humiliating trials like Odysseus returning to Penelope. He splits his pants, gets slobbered on, has to interact with a working class person, and even the next entry in the MCU, the Mattel Cinematic Universe, Ken returns to his status as a damsel. He is Helen of Troy this time, stolen by Paris before he once again endures more humiliating trials. They place him in contrast to this Hector-like figure and constantly make meta jokes about the insecure status of Ken's masculinity.
You think you're man enough to marry my Graziella?
No. Wait.
And when he isn't a comic relief character to be laughed at, his existence is barely justified. He's a prince at a ball, Lois Lane, or can you believe it? A prince at a ball. He's just there, vibing. In sum, Barbie's love interests are rarely more than Barbie's love interests. Only 2 films have meaningful character arcs for Ken's that actually parallels Barbie's. In Barbie and the Nutcracker learns how to believe in himself and have the courage to try, like Barbie. In the Pegasus one, Barbie and the guy learn to take responsibilities for their past and the people around them. They don't only seek redemption in the eyes of the other, they accomplish it together. And I think that's beautiful. I know I sound like I have a serious Pegasus bias, but I mean, come on, it's a Han Solo arc. How can you not like a Han Solo arc?
You actually think you're gonna build a wand of light?
And your point is?
It's just
a lot of simple tricks and nonsense.
Okay, maybe I have a tiny Pegasus movie bias. As one of the first original stories, it does a really interesting job of combining early feminist literature with common masculine mythopoetic tropes. For example, feminist literature in the medieval ages often expressed the anguish and brutality of patriarchy by having their protagonists transform into or communicate with animals. The transformation literally expresses their physical alienation, the claustrophobia of being trapped in a life you did not choose, and symbolically captures how marriage erases the humanity of women. Her tales are tragic, as it is only in death, or the death of the feminine surface, that the protagonist can escape the dehumanizing effect of the male gaze. Barbie, of course, eschews tragedy because she can magically subvert the male gaze. And she does it in heels. I mean, literally this time, she finds the power within and believes in herself, like Dorothy in the red heels.
You don't need to be helped any longer. You've always had the power to go back to Kansas.
I have. Of course. The princess has been with us all along.
And like Dorothy, Barbie frees everyone from their casing and sees them.
Don't worry, Clara. I'm just wood. Remember?
You and I know you're much more than that.
This is notable as historically, honoring the girls' subjectivity was monstrous. I mean, Medusa is kind of the most prominent figurehead of the female gaze. Susan R. Bauer suggests that Medusa is an icon of the female gaze, celebrated by women and feared by men because she represents a woman with the power to look back. Medusa is the look of the other as icon.
The look of the other reveals to me my object side, judges me, categorizes me. It identifies me with my external acts and appearances, with my self for others. It threatens, by ignoring my free subjectivity, to reduce me to the status of a thing in the world.
While Medusa turns men to stone, Barbie wields the gaze to neutralize it? For some reason, in many films, Barbie's power de-petrifies the world.
But Barbie doesn't dismantle the oppressive system, she sanctifies its power. Rather, unlike Dorothy, Barbie does a white savior. She doesn't see the inherent beauty and worthiness in a cowardly lion, a tin man that lacks a heart, or a brainless scarecrow. She imposes a text of humanity onto her subjects. She always chooses assimilation over abject transgression.
Or maybe it's just like a thing they do because it's easy to animate. I don't know. So you know what time it is? YouTube cliche time, because now that I've invoked the male gaze, we gotta talk about the female gaze. Ooh.
What is the female gaze? Well, let's look at Oxford Reference Dictionary.
A term coined by feminists in response to the claims made by Mulvey that the conventions established in classical Hollywood films required all spectators, regardless of their sex, to identify with the male protagonist and to adopt the controlling male gaze around which such films were held to be structured.
This means that people of all genders under a male, heterosexual, and patriarchal lens are objectified. They are seen not as subjects, but as sexual objects. Since the technology and language of cinema was made by and for men, the medium of film itself centralized heterosexual male desire. The women, by contrast, are denied the right to see. They are only seen. The male gaze is forced onto them. They are subjugated by the camera. The TikTok POV "you're a woman written by a man" trend is an example which displays how all behavior is sexualized under the male gaze. Your existence is oriented to someone else's pleasure. In contrast, the female gaze alludes to
The right of women to adopt the active and objectifying gaze that has been traditionally and stereotypically been associated with males, undermining the dominant cultural alignment of masculinity with activity and femininity with passivity. Despite the label, this need not involve replacing one form of gender essentialism with another. The objects of the gaze do not need to be confined to males.
Ken appears to be a seminal product of the female gaze. He was quite literally designed for female consumption. So perhaps the most accurate description of Kenergy is the objectified condition under the female gaze.
Ken's physical appearance complies to the incels' definition of the female gaze. Apparently, incels are vaguely cognizant of Laura Mulvey's introduction to visual pleasure.
Now, if you, like me, were ignorant to this sacred knowledge, understanding the female gaze is a part of looks maxing. Traditional black-pilled incels, involuntary celibates who succumb to hopelessness, purport they will never find love and happiness because they lack the attributes which women find attractive. The Mega Chad is a tentpole image on the internet because he represents the impossible standards of attractiveness incels deem necessary for love. Looks maxing is thus the practice of physical self-improvement those who don't give up embark on. It usually involves a bodybuilding regime, steroids. However, my research uncovered parts of the incel community which recognize that hypermasculine images don't appeal to women, but to other men.
Something known as the male gaze and then the female gaze, and most guys base their entire image based off the male gaze.
And this is also one of the reasons why I always bash Hamza and Andrew Tate. They're making you believe that in order to become the most attractive to women, that is the same thing as being the highest in the male dominance hierarchy.
Looks maxing is most effective when you exploit the female gaze.
Look is like a tool of manipulation of the outcomes as opposed to like an investment in something that pleases you.
Incels explain female gaze by the following categories.
Number 1, physique. The Adonis Golden ratio. He explains that women prioritize leanness over bulk. I mean, look at the difference between a G.I. Joe toy and a Ken doll. Number 2, hair. the most important part of the female gaze. Women prefer clean-shaven or a light stubble.
Like the Shawn Mendes, Justin Bieber, like Timothy Chalamet.
Accordingly, Ken has rarely ever had facial hair, or you're given the power to shave it off. Women also prefer longer, fluffier hair, either because it shows your youthfulness or hides your skull shape. Number 3, jewelry. He explains that women don't really care about 007-esque watches. No. They prefer other types of lighter jewelry like rings, necklaces, earrings.
Around his neck.
The incel, of course, does not account for behavior, personality, or attitude, nor do they consider that the gaze's subversive potential lies in its prioritization of the woman spectator's agency. When femmes can be active lookers, they are empowered to identify their own humanity. That is why identification is so central to Mulvey's theory. The male gaze dehumanizes its objects because it encourages identification not with the object of gaze, but the voyeur. Mulvey connects identification with the psychoanalytic idea of the mirror stage. According to dudes like Jacques Lacan, when babies recognize themselves in the mirror for the first time, they experience a little thing called subjectivity.
Think about dying.
We do this via a process of recognition and misrecognition. We recognize an image of ourselves that is superior, more perfect to our experience of our own bodies, yet the image is still seen to be somewhat false. The representation in the mirror does not capture our interiority, our suchness, our va-va-voom. This recognition, misrecognition, self-image thing is how we constitute ego ideals. I'll be honest, psychoanalysis sounds like goo-goo gaga to me, but Mulvey extends its identification from the mirror to the screen. The disproportionate number of male protagonists in cinema empower ideal images of the spectator, so as the spectator identifies with the protagonist controlling the narrative, he too gains possession over the image. In recognizing the protagonist's point of view, audiences can see the protagonist's complex humanity and the women they own in the film indirectly as theirs.
Great. Why don't you just give me a bottle of scotch and a handgun to blow my fucking head off? Are we done here with this psychiatry bullshit?
You know what? You can leave!
What the fuck did I just put myself?
Consequently, it's unsurprising that incels see the female gaze as superficial, narcissistic, and duplicitous.
Women are narcissists. Maybe you can reflect some beauty back to them. It allows them to see themselves in you. This is why women prefer pretty boys 9 times out of 10. They love pretty boys, man.
This misunderstanding reveals why Mulvey's framework cannot support the female gaze. She writes,
According to the principles of the ruling ideology and the psychical structures that back it up, the male figure cannot bear the burden of sexual objectification. Man is reluctant to gaze at his exhibitionist-like. Hence the split between spectacle and narrative supports the man's role as the active one of forwarding the story, making things happen. The man controls the film fantasy and also emerges as the representative of power in a further sense, as the bearer of the look of the spectator, transferring it behind the screen to neutralize the extra-diegetic tendencies represented by woman as spectacle.
Incels refuse to be a spectacle under the female gaze. Like the split between spectacle and narrative, they reinforce a sort of Cartesian dualistic divide between a superior mind and a superficially feminine body.
So I always have this personal belief where you take the pretty boy persona, this external appearance, but then you combine that with the hyper-masculine, aggressive personality traits. You can combine them to create the ultimate man. Now,
this masculine mind over matter motto manifests in the film's ironic fandom for the Barbie movie. As this Twitter user notes, they should be unable to reconcile Ken's existence as an exhibitionist object.
Greta Gerwig has femcel bros in a headlock. How are you going to literally me, Ryan Gosling, and Barbie? You're literally Ken. You're like Barbie's dickless himbo arm candy?
This wise and articulate oracle speaks truly. While film cells purport to identify with Ken, they are really identifying with Ryan Gosling, and it is him who gains control over the fantasy.
What are you doing here?
A drive?
Just as the incels exploit the gaze as a tool for looks maxing, film cells make the gaze a fantasy they control. The male figure and spectator is always the active subject in the driver's seat. This tweet is satire, but I think it reveals the truthfulness of the tactic.
Ever since the reveal of Ryan Gosling of Ken, I have seen no women talking about the Barbie movie, just guys making literally memes and reacting hearts to every Ryan Gosling Ken post. This proves that the Barbie movie is a film bro movie, made for men only.
The ironic fandom exists for a real human subject who is representative of their own humanity, not Barbies.
I fight clubs, mix trails, hold fish, not gaslight, gatekeep, girl boss. Or would I?
To justify being spectators in a film designed for femme subjects, the fandom tends to wield other sigma and alpha, literally me figures, or just big bulk dudes. This enforces the aforementioned mind over matter negotiation, or what I dub ironic Bronesian dualism.
We should be posting about racism or anime, but instead we're fans of ponies? How novel!
Physically, they are watching just girly things, but they are exonerated from emasculation because on the inside, they are literally Highlander.
Thanks, Ken. But the jar was already open. I was putting the lid back on.
It's significant that this hierarchical organization of consciousness is also fundamental to many philosophies of oppression. Aristotle famously asserted the superiority of the rational soul to justify oppression and the subordination of women. More like Aristotle. Am I right? Aristotle's natural slave theory proposes slaves aren't people, they are naturally property, a tool of action separate from its owner. Such a distinction was important as Aristotle believed domination is fundamental to existence. There must be a union between the naturally ruling entity and the entity which is naturally ruled for the preservation of both. The relationship between men and women is one such construction. They cannot live without each other for the sake of reproduction, yet one must be naturally ruled because she's always complaining about her tummy hurting because somebody is drinking coffee on an empty stomach, you heathens, goobers, and gobstoppers.
For the one who can see by means of the mind is by nature ruler and master, and the one who can work by means of the body is by nature a slave.
No, he just really hated the grills and asserted that they were naturally inferior, mutilated males, so they must be subordinated. Aristotle distinguishes the relationship between men and women from that of the free man and slave, but they are similarly primarily instruments of physical action. You know, the girls do the stuff of the baby and the homemaking. Naturally, it follows they must be ruled by men, since the soul rules the body. Intelligence rules the appetite. The dominant note rules the musical scale. Domination is just the fundamental condition for existence. And people were apparently very compelled by this logic because the construction of human difference through binary opposition, hierarchy, and objectification is the unstoppable juggernaut that supplied the justification for domination throughout history. Take the Christianity thingamajig. The divide between spirit and flesh notably helps facilitate the subjugation of women. Eve, of course, was secondary to Adam. She also innovated this thing called original sin. Then they are banished from paradise, made ashamed of their nakedness as they become objects to be seen in the world. Bing, bang, boom, women! Yuck! Therefore, femmes are regulated to the sinful realm, the base realm of the flesh. Their fleshy bodies are just that, bodies that signify sexuality, sin, chaos, and nature. It follows that they must be ruled by men. Imagine that was a clown nose, so it was too far out of reach. Give me 1 second. It's for our own good. I mean, it's really not good to drink coffee on an empty stomach and it disrupts your hormones and makes you angry. In Black Skin, White Mask, Frantz Fanon famously illustrates how this logic is wielded in the colonial project to naturalize categories of people. One is the supreme, whole, good universal, and the other is forced to assume the identity of the deformed inferior. Colonization and anti-black racism therefore conquers not only bodies, but selves. The gaze of the oppressor denies the existence of your inalienable human interiority. So as you assume the eyes of the world, your soul erodes. It becomes the marble bricks in a panopticon built by strangers.
Is that Fanon understood that beneath what he called the bodily and corporeal schema is another schema, a schema composed of the stories and the anecdotes and the metaphors and the images, which is really, he says, what constructs the relationship between the body and its social and cultural space. These stories, not the fact itself. The fact itself is just exactly that trap of the surface. The worst and most difficult point about racism is that it is so manifestly banal.
Fanon concludes his book with one wish, that the tool never possess the man. Humans are ends in themselves, and we should love thusly. There's also an incredible amount of scholarship exploring masked people's relationship to being on the other side of this whole mind, body, spirit, flesh, reason, emotion dichotomy. In an androcentric, misogynistic culture that devalues emotions, feelings become a strange property belonging to rationality, to be dominated, destroyed, forgotten, and numbed.
Bell Hooks expresses this violent separation between self and socially desirable mask as such.
The stress of guarding and protecting a false self is harmful to male emotional well-being. It erodes self-esteem. Much of the depression men suffer is directly related to their inability to be whole, even though they have been socialized to create and maintain false selves. Most remember the true self that once existed, and it is that memory of loss, coupled with rage at the world, which encouraged the surrender of self, that engenders depression.
Alienation based on this dualistic divide of self also gives us an actual clue into the meaningful tragedy of incels. Consider the orchestra of meaning, suffering, and despair. This meme.
The Giga Chad replaces Joy from Blade Runner, an embodiment of Eve and desire under the male gaze itself. This is the moment Kay finally reconciles his unhuman humanness, recognition, misrecognition. He realizes he isn't the main character, and desire itself never authentically belonged to him. He never had a choice to be or not to be, let alone to want. Yet, it's probably the first time he successfully experiences identification. It's not here, in one of the coolest shots of all time, when he's told he's a real boy.
I know it's real.
It's here. Hence, I extrapolate that this meme communicates an anguish over an ideal film cells feel constrained to desire and embody. Joe sees himself in Joy, and as incels demonstrate with their jawline and skull obsession, it is indeed repulsive that a body is being devalued as a text that can never attain universal humanity. Ryan Gosling is literally me, because those most despairing cannot imagine a world that can love anything beyond their surface or their utility. Nor can they see a version of themselves that can love their soul.
In many ways. What do you like about Patrick Bateman?
What do I like?
Yeah.
I like nothing about him. I mean, he's a completely unredeeming character, you know?
As a result, existence becomes an instrument to be looks-maxed. The literally me memes are ironic. They know they aren't literally Ryan Gosling, and it is precisely the fiction that rings true. The real we hug with parentheses is proof that we are keenly aware of the false mask and its social consequences. They feel like a collection of parts that never constitute a whole, real person.
And hopelessness is a function of depression, right? And so I want to just name that sometimes, not all the time, people might be experiencing like organic or situational depression. And so that hopelessness comes a little bit easier to them. So they're like, I give up. I feel helpless and hopeless. And now they're down this hole. But those holes are really like algorithmically seductive too. You know, and so it's like tapping into all of the things that someone in that mood state would want to hear, giving them confirmation bias, giving them community, until you're just deep diving into some poisonous stuff that doesn't affirm your inherent humanity, that doesn't help you come to see yourself as worthy. It just helps you dehumanize others so that you feel a little less shitty.
But don't worry, Bell Hooks has a solution. We can recover our mutilated souls and become whole with integrity. One must break with patriarchy's lies, take responsibility, and be open to change. We can literally be like Kay when, in recognizing his falseness, makes his first authentic choice.
Go meet your daughter.
Once we become accountable and surrender control, we take steps towards joy. Hooks highlights a quote from Nathaniel Branden. Again, it is taking responsibility that sets me free. When we step away from gender roles, we are swallowed by a world of intimate, beatific, transformative choice. We can look in the mirror without an impossible universal staring back. Right now, we define the human as this demeaning technology of domination. Can you imagine what your reflection would look like if humanity was defined by you? The substance of your soul is not soul, it's you. Whatever you choose to define as you. And every existent part of you matters. We have to see ourselves with our own eyes.
Now, the first things that we have to begin to do is sit and look in the mirror and be okay with who we are. I don't know if anybody saw the Latifah Bessie Smith movie, and one of my favorite scenes in that film is when she takes off all her clothes after everybody's gone and everybody's left her, and then she's in the empty house, and she sits there for quite a long beat in cinema time, and she just beholds herself. Such a powerful scene to me, because I think that's where we have to start, you know?
And I know this advice sucks, but I approve, because the winner of Genuine Ken, the Great American Boyfriend, is not who best represents Ken Carson.
Can't believe it.
The redundantly titled final episode, The Real Genuine Ken, lets the guys loose on New York, I got a pizza pie, that's Italian. The Real Genuine Kenergy will be judged by 50 women and the official judges according to 5 photos they take at iconic New York locations to show their interpretation of romance. They also have $500 to spend on a grand gesture. If I dared overanalyze the show, which I am doing, I would say this challenge asks the Kens how well they can wield, embody, and appeal to the female gaze. They are literally asked to use a different lens, have different eyes to see the world.
This guy, I'm not gonna look up his name, that's how little he means to me, I wash my hands of him, takes some pretty good photos and gifts boxes of chocolates to the girls. And Curtis is great, we love Curtis, but he takes worse photos.
This guy's stealing my whole act.
He also presents a riskier gesture. He gives each woman a penny on which to wish and donates his remaining budget
to the Make-A-Wish Foundation.
By all metrics of Kenergy, the other guy should win. By delivering the idealistic box of chocolates and the aesthetically pleasing photos, the only things women require, food and photos, he best upholds Kenergy.
You know, making 50 different women ooh and ah is amazing. It's making me feel awesome right now.
He should win. Right?
Is you Curtis?
No, Curtis wins! The winner of Genuine Ken does not do so via excessive Kenergy, but through his sincerity and regard for others. He is appealing not because he conforms to the female gaze, but because he is a genuinely kind, creative person. Because unfortunately, Ken doesn't exist. Curtis does. And he and the 50 women seem to really care about people more than fiction.
It is an unhelpful cliche at this point to say that being yourself is desirable, but consider the cyclical despair and loneliness of the alternative. Those who don't succumb to hopelessness often embark on identity projects that distance themselves from personal authenticity and responsibility. Looksmaxers conquer their bodies to attain the ideal, and Brownian dualists are reinforcing the very mind-body divide, contributing to their estrangement. If you want to get all fancy and gross, I dare not look at number, they are assembling what sociologists would call hybrid masculinity.
1. Symbolically distance men from hegemonic masculinity. 2. Situate the masculinities available to young, white, heterosexual men as somehow less meaningful than the masculinities associated with various marginalized and subordinated others.
Can't do brain surgery. I've never flown a plane. I'm not the president. I'm not good enough.
And 3. Fortify existing social and symbolic boundaries in ways that often work to conceal systems of power and inequality in historically new ways. Hybridization usually occurs when people realize the reality of privilege, or rather, its falsity. They thought they were entitled to power, don't experience the benefits, falsely interpret their lack of power as a form of marginalization, and suddenly discover the hierarchies we're taught are naturally necessary are social constructs designed to harm. Enter the good old anxiety stick. Kierkegaard construed the good old Adam-Eve-Apple situationship a little differently. He proposed the myth of original sin first denotes the birth of anxiety. Man is not condemned to sin forever and ever and ever because of one girl's iced coffee addiction. Freedom is fundamental to human existence. And so is the anxiety that precedes it.
Eve handed Adam the apple, but it was God who gave him a choice. Adam didn't have a definition for good or evil, but he did know that God said, Adam, don't eat from that tree, it doesn't have enough protein, or something like that. I don't know. I've never read the Bible. The prohibition demonstrated Adam's capacity to choose. He saw the possibility of possibility. In the words of Tatiana, choices. As such, we are not condemned to sin. We are condemned to choose. Internal anxiety! Woohoo! FD Signifier's Bo Burnham video excellently demonstrates this dizziness of being able, our simultaneous feelings of disgust and attraction to our ability to choose or sin. White people like myself inherited privilege from centuries of injustice. Language, culture, institutions, feelings, everything is set up to reproduce white supremacy by exploiting and destroying everything else.
Freedom is a much misunderstood concept, when the prevailing understanding in Canada is an illusion of freedom. If your freedom is built on the denial of freedom to others, then you didn't actually have freedom at all. You had privilege.
A common reaction to privilege, however, is grief. Many conceive it as freedom's end, as if they've inherited an original sin.
It's all for my benefit, and to a great extent, there's nothing I can do about it. And then a scary, ugly question pops up. Do I even really want to, or do I just want to feel better?
To eschew the negotiations that this moral anxiety facilitates, many make the Kierkegaardian non-choice. They decide they're not free at all.
If there is one aspect that separates the current crisis of masculinity from those that have come before, it is white masculinity's turn to the representational politics of identity. White masculinity places itself in other identity locations in order to disavow that it is normative. Once it has become visible, it reworks the meaning of that visibility by locating itself elsewhere.
When you don't feel free or whole, what's so wrong with just closing your eyes? A lot, actually, because privilege operates most effectively in invisibility.
Look at the history of white feminism. White women have been some of the most vital tools for white supremacy. They first climbed society's hierarchies by subjugating black women during slavery. While white women became perfect saints, black women were erased from both humanity and femininity as they became society's ultimate other. White feminism is merely the pursuit of white patriarchal power. In the words of bell hooks once more, attaining privilege means you're not liberated from the system. You're liberated to serve the system.
We just want what men have had all these years.
White feminism is especially present in female gaze rhetoric online. We usually discuss the female gaze as the transgressive alternative to common ways of seeing. We constantly see content about the revolutionary power of dressing for the female gaze and the desire for men written by women. However, as a commodifying gaze, it still constructs ideals which reify unequal power relations. It's also significant that the most cherished under the female gaze are the extremely straight, white, able-bodied, and rich Mr. Darcy and Timothy Chalamet. The female gaze cannot be liberatory when it only changes patriarchy's asymmetrical distribution of power. Giving white, cis, straight women the agency to be voyeurs is not radical.
Privilege doesn't actually serve anybody is one of those things.
Case in point, Barbie's world still reinforces a system of binary oppositions Aristotle himself would celebrate. Barbie is the rational force of reason, and Ken is devalued and restored to the subordinated realm of bodily power. After all, if Kenergy is about anything, it's objectification. He is just Ken. Not everything, not a whole, just missing. Reversing the position between subject and object does not mean that spectators nor the fiction can escape the dominant imagination. It may only successfully reproduce oppression.
Oh, sorry, that's probably foreshadowing Barbie again? I'll be right back. What? But she's made by women. She's just girly things.
Yes, you can hit me up on Instagram and join the community there at Dr. Candice Nicole, Dr. Candice and hit me up on YouTube at Dr. Candice Nicole, where I have my 2 podcasts. And my website's drcandicenicole.com. You can see what kind of stuff I'm up to. But the book is called Good Sex, and it's published by Row House, and it will be out February 2025. So Valentine's Day 2025.
Oh my gosh! Amazing. I'm Sally. I run the channel called ANREL, which is short for Anarcho Relating, where I talk about anarchist theory applied to interpersonal relationships. Is the shortest elevator pitch I can give, I guess.
Embody your essence. See the world through your eyes, if just for a moment. Do it well enough, and they'll carry parts of your essence with them forever, intertwined with their own. A great artist doesn't just know what to do, they know what they're doing.
It's like it's sharp, it's snappy, you get the hook, enough
That's
mystery to keep them in.
Mystery.